So, Assalamu alaikum viewers, please do subscribe to my channel. It won't take long. And finally, we have come to the last aspect to be discussed of the social contract theory, that is the defects and the value of the social contract theory or its merits. So let's get going. First point is that the social contract theory is unhistorical. Well, the exponents of the social contract theory has regarded it as historical, but as we see in history that we do not find any time where the people had no social relationships, where the men were so isolated, because even in the primitive ages the people had certain social relationships. There were tribes, there were families. And secondly, that we do not find any time where this social contract was made in the history, because it's not it's something queer to the human reason that we imagine that the people who were so aggressive, just like Hobbes had explained, or the people living in the state of nature, that they had no idea of the political institutions or organization, and they suddenly and deliberately come together and form a contract to bring into a realization the institution of state. So the second one is that it is sociologically unscientific. So, as I have mentioned earlier, that the social contract theory explains in its pre-social version that the people were isolated, there were no relationships, but we see in the sociological history that there were the social tribe or the family was the social unit and not an individual. And secondly, it tells us that humans had freedom and equality and they had their natural rights, but it's not the case, because individual has not been recognized until recently, and after centuries of the struggle, now that we regard individual as a social unit and give them the freedom and equality and other rights. So it's sociologically unscientific. The other point is that its transition is impossible. So, as the statement implies, that it's regarding the transition from the state of nature to the civilized society and to the state, institution of state. Now, how can we think as the people who were aggressive and who were selfish, self-seeking, who were not social, who were actually anti-social, and as a result of a single contract, such people transformed the whole state from a state of the lawlessness and a state of war into a law-abiding and a peaceful community. Because such a transition and a change in the conduct, in the habits, in the character of human beings actually need a lot of training, a lot of education and development, expanded over years or maybe centuries. So it's kind of impossible to think that the savage people become saints all just because of a single contract. Now the fourth point is that the theory is illogical. There are certain reasons why the theory seems to be illogical. Number one is that the theory tells us that in the state of nature the people were all equal, and there was equality, there was freedom. But to human reason, the equality does not seem to be natural actually, but inequality does. So inequality is actually natural, not the equality. And secondly, it tells social contract theory explains that there were rights were given to the people, but as it's a universal principle that whenever there are rights, there are duties also. So when there are rights and there are duties, it means there is a social common consciousness. But the social contract theory now also tells us that there were no common consciousness among the people before the contract. So it's kind of a logical thing. And other thing is that it represents that the state is, it's artificially manufactured by the people. So it's mechanical invention by human, and it tells us that the state, the state of nature and the natural rights were actually natural to human being. And on the one hand, and on the other hand, now the institution of state as made by man and the laws of the state as made by a man or artificial, and it does not represent the human nature, which is kind of refutable, because the laws that are made in usually in these countries or states are the representative of the desires, of the needs of the human body and the interests of the people. They are the reflective of the human nature. And as Aristotle has propounded uh, that man is by nature an animal, it means that man is a part is naturally a part of the state, and the state is a natural institution, and it is as natural to human being as any of the primitive conditions. So this is what is kind of contradictory or illogical. The next point is that the theory itself is self-contradictory. Number one point is that it's self-contradictory because the theory tells us that the people in the state of nature were not social, and then all of a sudden they came together to form this contract to make the institution of state. Now it means when they came together, it means that they had already a common consciousness among them, right? And when the contract when they form the contract, it means there should be an authority to enforce that contract, right? To make the people be abiding by the contract. And thirdly, that the contract terminology is actually it is a legal term. So it means that there were laws to enforce that contract. So these were the three things that were needed to enforce that contract. First, the authority, there were to be laws, there were to be political consciousness. And when we think that all of these three things were already present in the people were politically conscious, there were laws, there was authority to enforce that social contract, it means like there is then no justification or logical reason to form the contract when the people are already conscious, when the people have already laws and they have already the authority. So it's self-contradictory. The second last point is that it contradicts the true basis of the state, because the social contract theory tells us that there is a voluntary contract between the individual and the state, and this is a voluntary contract. It means it's not permanent one, but actually the state is a compulsory institution. It's a permanent union. It is not just like some trade partnership between certain parties or individuals for their certain interest, and then they end up at that contract. And Edmund Burke actually criticized social contract theory on these bases, that the state should not be think of as some partnership agreement in a trade of pepper or coffee or tobacco or some other low concern to be taken up, or neither it should be considered as some little partnership, or that it can be dissolved whenever the parties like. No, the state should be looked with reverence. The state is created for unlimited purposes, and there is this dealing or partnership in every virtue, in all perfection. So when we cannot end this agreement between the state and individual over generations, it means this contract is not just between the current generation and the state, but it is a contract between the previous generation, between the dead and the future generations and the current generations as one party, and the state as the other party, right? And the last step is that it is dangerous. Why? Now, the social contract theory implies that that state is a man-made institution. That it means that it's just a plaything in the hands of revolutionaries who can make and remake the institution of the state, right? This was the reason why the French revolutionaries increased, and they were so influenced by the social contract theory expounded by Rousseau especially. And other thing is that it means that as the state is man-made, so the man can break it down into pieces and reconstitute it. So this is what it implies. Now we come to the merits or the value of social contract theory. how social contract theory has proved to be beneficial in philosophy, in politics, for democracy, for so many things. And the first point is that social contract theory has told us that at least the state is a man-made institution. It's not a divine institution, as the theory of the divine origin tells us that the state is made by God, right? And even the kings are appointed by God. But the social contract theory tells us that no, this isn't the case. It's human institutions. Humans made the state. So it's the refutation of divine rights of kings. It's refuted the concept of the divine rights of king, that because it tells us the state rests on the consent of the governed. This is the very basic or very significant point that the social contract theory has promulgated, that the consent of the people matters. It made us think that actually we can choose the people by ourselves who can govern us. We can choose the government. So it means that the kings do not have the divine right to rule. So it's a refutation of the divine rights of kings also. So when we think that we can choose the government because the government stands on the consent of the people, it means the social contract theory has made us actually the proponents of democracy, when we can choose the people who can govern us. And that is why we see the origins of the modern democracy back to the social contract theory. And it's totally the refutation of despotism also, when we think that the consent of the people matters, and it highlighted the relation between the individual and the state based on the will of the people. Then it means the despots, the monarchs, and the absolute despotism finds no place, right? So this also refutes despotism. So this was all about the social contract theory. If you haven't watched the other videos on social contract theory, do visit my channel, where you will find the social contract theory expounded by J.J. Rousseau, by John Locke, and also by Thomas Hobbes. And do subscribe my channel. Thank you so much.